Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So today we'll focus on deeper revelations of ET presence and what it means in terms of conscious evolution. And Desiree and JJ will be, and Alan as well, will be sharing a new development regarding the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency making a public database of over 1,500 pages of UFO related research from ATIP, which is the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which is a former US Department of Defense program. And we're also honored to have our very special guest, Tim Murty, who will be presenting on Pan-African UFOlogy and how, with increasing evidence that there has been ongoing ET presence on Earth, human beings can prepare their mindsets for a new reality. And yeah, so that's basically the agenda. And then if we have time, we'll talk about maybe what you'd like to see going forward with this synergy circle. So for now, I'd like to turn it over to Alan, JJ, and Desiree to share with us a little bit about what they know about the release of the database of documents and help facilitate us in a conversation.
Oh, thank you, Diane, and thank you everybody for showing up here, because I think it's so important we gather like this from all over the world to see what's really going on. Well, how do we get to the source of a phenomena that is worldwide and, in a sense, incomprehensible to the old levels of thinking? And I just want to do like a quick little thing showing what I'm up to, and 5-part series called Making Contact, based on my book Making Contact, where we're going to go deeper into this movement by a 5-part conversation, starting off with the Hurtaks and Nick Pope, and talking to Moulton Howe, Whitley, Strieber, a lot of the all-stars of the team, Marie Rodwell. So we're going to look at levels from the exterior to the interior. You can go to makingcontactseries.com to find out about that. That's just a little quick commercial, makingcontactseries.com, because I think we need to keep this conversation going. And one of the things that has been sparking that conversation recently is this. This was the U.S. Sun filed in 2017 for Freedom of Information Act documents from the Pentagon about the release of the story that broke the headlines in the New York Times about ATIP and what they were really investigating. So this is some of the headlines, which is a little negative, which, the papers like to focus on negative: space invaders, UFOs, left witnesses, radiation burns, brain problem, damaged nerve claims. I mean, that does happen. And there's also the other side that's not reported here, which is a lot of benefits people get: increased telepathy, sometimes spontaneous healings, increased creativity, more connection to the earth. So we're just seeing sort of the negative parts here, but this is from Defense Intelligence documents: anomalous acute, subacute field effects, UFO injuries. This, I think, is just to scare people about one aspect of the phenomenon. This is not all that's in the 1,500 pages, but this is what the U.S. Sun, who accessed these documents, were focused on. And there's a lot in that ATIP program. ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification. And he's been at the forefront of what's been called disclosure, and he's been the most public figure in the field. And he's given lots of interviews. I interviewed him once on Clubhouse. I just want to show a little part of this recent interview he did with, I think these people are called the UFO Man. But Elizondo's really leading the charge, and he's a former intelligence officer that left the government in order to start to share this phenomena with the world. Of course, he's held back by some NDAs he had to sign with the government, but he's able at least enough to talk around the situation. So I'm just going to show you a little clip, like 2-minute clip from an interview he just did. And here this is.
And it has for a long time. and there were decisions made
He's
by
talking about why the government has not come forward in the past, which I don't completely buy.
individuals, by organizations, institutions, and governments at the time that were probably believed to be in the best interest of the people. But interests of people change over time. Cultures change, likes and dislikes change, right? Music changes, right? So I think the time has come where we can have that honest conversation. But if anybody thinks that, oh, it's just a simple question of, tell me the truth and I'll go on and I'll, go back to my daily routine. It's not as simple as that. I would encourage people to not think so myopically, because this is a very, very significant conversation we are embarking upon, and it will have long-term effects on humanity. I think mostly good, but maybe some bad.
Mhm.
And if we do our due diligence and try to see ahead of time what can be impacted, I think that's smart. And I'm not trying to embarrass anybody. I don't want to go, see, government, you're bad. The government's not.
That this guy inside the government is saying this is a significant conversation that's going to impact basically the whole world. And that's sort of why he's saying it's been such a long, drawn out process, because they, the people forming policy, the narrative makers, actually don't know, in my opinion, what to say about it. They haven't sized it up because they don't really know what's going on. And this is where I would like to call on the work of the Hurtaks just to kind of respond, because the Hurtak JJ been involved in this since the 70s, and Desiree's been following every part of it. So I'd like to hear their response, and maybe our friends from Australia, about what's going on. So this is a serious conversation that the world has to have, and the government doesn't know how to approach it. So they're just, I think, dragging their feet, basically. That's my understanding. But I want to hear what the people like JJ and Desiree have to say about that.
Right. Well, thank you, Alan. Well, it reminds me of what Linda Moulton Howe said when her contact talked to her about, this is her military contact, talked about the encounter he had. It's so overwhelming. And I think Jan Hartson told us about Lou Elizondo that he still feels somewhat in link with these beings. It's really, it's more than just making contact. It's ongoing contact. It's contact that's conscious all the time, knowing what is going on in your mind. That's a little scary for all of us. And so what the Sun said, the report, 1,500 page report that was released by the Pentagon through certain channels, about, we'll say, you get red like you showed in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but that volcano, I always say that, no one understands why the guy was building this volcano in his living room. And that's the kind of stuff that happens. You keep having this thought in your mind. They're always connected to you. It's really a different scenario. I don't think it's negative. I mean, it didn't prove to be negative in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but it proved to be very, very different.
Right. I've been involved for 49 years. I work with Dr. Hynek, who was the father of American UFOlogy. I work with John Mack in South Africa. I work with 3 astronauts who would described extraterrestrial technologies in outer space, all of whom privately advanced that there were positive forces at work beside the traditional negative. I'm glad that Luis Elizondo in that segment admitted that there were positive sides. I think this is the situation of looking at what we will call higher consciousness and spiritual reality that traditional scientists do not want to face, without accepting the fact that we are both physical as well as consciousness, non-physical entities of life. We're not going to get any place. We just go around, as we have the last 75 years, looking at technology rather than the consciousness behind technology. Both matter as well as mind come out of consciousness. And we're dealing with a tremendous revising of history as we know it. And the MUFON publication, Mutual UFO Network, that stated that there was at least 82 extraterrestrial races is just the tip of an iceberg. We need a new sociology, psychology, and cosmology to simply say, look, we've got friends, good and bad. we need to get on with understanding that there's a positive side to evolution.
And if I can just add also, Alan, that, what the report said, it wasn't listed in the Sun, is that there are these sexual encounters which have to do with hybrids and situations like that. And I know, Alan, recently you've been working with quite a few people who feel they've been connected with hybrids. So maybe after we discuss things with Tim, we can go also into that conversation.
Yeah, false pregnancies or mispregnancies. Extraction of DNA. Yeah, that's a big part of why the government also not coming forward, because how are they stopping this? So yeah, should we talk to Ken and Brad a little bit about their perspective from the Australian point of view?
Yeah, well, I would echo the comments by the Drs. Hurtak about consciousness and how important it is to understand the nature of consciousness and to be connected to those higher realms through the consciousness field. On disclosure, I'd always imagined that it would be the President of the United States coming out and saying aliens exist, but it's becoming more and more clear that that won't happen, or I don't think that will happen, but it'll come from multiple angles. So the media, like that Sun article, movies, even discussions like this are part of that disclosure movement.
And there definitely seems to be a lot more interest in them from Australia. We're seeing a lot more interest in the younger people in UFOs and coming out now about having experiences. So we'll start to see a lot more positive turn. And I think we're seeing more of a citizen disclosure where people are coming out and disclosing more than actually what's going on in the government.
Right. And I just want to back up what you also said, Desiree, that it's not about making contact. It is ongoing. This is not just a one-time phenomenon. This is a phenomenon that's going to change the history of the world, the nature of reality, the biology, technology. This has such a huge impact that's why there's such a lead up to this phenomena. And besides the fact that this is a worldwide phenomenon, we think, people in the US think, oh, it's just happening here, but Australia, and then Diane's going to introduce her friend from Africa. This is planetary. This is not isolated incidents of people out in some cornfield seeing a UFO. This is happening in cities and continents, on oceans, under the ocean. This is so big that I don't know why everyone's not talking about it. I mean, I'm talking about it. I'm doing a book signing today for my book, but it's so massive and such a impact on human civilization that this has to be, and I think this is what Alessandro's good about, it has to be a public conversation. And so that's my input. And maybe talking about the worldwide phenomena, we're really fortunate today to have someone who's been studying the UFO situation on the African continent. And I've been looking for someone from Africa because I've contacted people in Asia, South America, Europe, North America. I was missing Africa, and here we have a great African expert on the field. So anything else you want to say, Desiree, JJ, or should Diane just want to...
Yeah, let Diane introduce Tim.
Okay, great. Thanks, Diane.
Okay, so I'm going to spotlight Tim. So I'm trying to do both things at the same time. So I spotlight, I'll remove yours. Okay, there's Tim. Great. So it's really my pleasure to introduce my old friend from my days at the United Nations in Geneva, Tim Murty. Tim is an academic researcher with over 25 years of research in the field of peace building and reconciliation in Africa. He is a professor of African studies from the University of Cape Town in South Africa, as well as an author and editor of numerous books on peace. He also has authored a number of online media articles in South Africa on the UFO phenomena, and is currently researching on Pan-African UFOlogy, which he will be focusing his presentation on today. And Tim, we're just so grateful you're with us, and thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to your presentation. So you have the floor. As we used to say at the UN in Geneva, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Diane. It's good to see you again after almost 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years we were together in Geneva. I was working with the UN, and Diane was leading us in the NGO Committee on Spirituality and Values, and really excellent work there. And I'm glad to see you continued on this pathway, Diane. Really doing really great work. I went into the academic field, and then I found my way back somehow. And it's great to see you again. And thank you for the invitation to be part of this Synergy Circle. I know there's a lot to talk about on the issues that Alan has raised, so I'm going to try to be very, very quick, to keep it down to about 8 minutes if I can. But I think, as Alan mentioned, this is a global phenomenon, and it's important for us to try to just learn from other parts of the world. So I've been very, very interested in what's happened, what has happened in Africa, or what is the legacy of this phenomenon in Africa. And so just started digging, and really at very, very early stages, this is more of a conversation starter rather than a developed piece of work. I think what we find is that with increasing awareness about the need to raise consciousness, and we just talked about consciousness and this huge debate about nuts and bolts versus consciousness. I think it's not really a real debate, because if we have both belief systems kind of coming together under the umbrella of consciousness, we find out actually that it's all linked, as we say. And then the question comes is, what is our interstellar heritage? And I've been keen to get this conversation going in Africa. And as Alan says, there's not been a lot of interest really. So we have a lot of work to do on our continent to get Pan-African ufology moving forward. But let me just start by saying that the continent owes a lot of debt to Cynthia Hind, who did some amazing work back in the 1980s and the 1990s. She passed in 2000, and she used to produce the publication UFO Afri News, which you can Google online, which is a journal that documented some of the cases that she researched back in time. So I will move through these slides very, very quickly. I've got about 8 minutes. I'm not going to take much more than that. And Diane can share the PowerPoint to this group by email. I've already sent it to her, so she can quickly have a look through it. So I'm going to touch upon, I won't spend time on Egypt. I think everyone's very familiar with that. The Dogon peoples of Mali, I think you have some familiarity with that. Maybe just very quickly touch on Cynthia's work, and then the Ariel School in Zimbabwe and Credo Mutua, and then future directions. I think we're already beginning to talk about that now. What do we do to raise awareness, to reset the human mindset? What are our strategies when the time comes to actually engage with our interstellar visitors going forward? So in terms of the legacy of ET visitation in Africa, I think Egypt is the best known, clearly. And the hieroglyphics have these depictions of flying saucers, which historians have struggled to explain and to provide us some context as to where did the Egyptians get these ideas from, or what were they? Then there's a lot of work that's been done on the spiritual dimension and otherworldly beings. I think the stigma and ridicule is also quite high in Africa due to also very strong religious presence on the African continent, religious convictions, I should say, on the African continent. And so if we kick off with just the spiritual dimension, there's a group called the Cory and the San peoples of Southern Africa who have been living in the Kalahari Desert, and they believed in something called the noon energy that enabled them to open up portals and transmit into other dimensions and have out-of-body experiences with other dimensions. And this can fall within the category of some extra or otherworldly or other dimensional type of interactions with beings from other dimensions. In terms of Egypt, as I said, I think this is very well known. I'm going to leave this to the side. We know the stories of the pyramids. A lot of work has been done to, for example, illustrate the great pyramid in Giza and its the alignment of 3 pyramids with the Orion star system. So I think a lot of work has been done on this, and it's just important to pick up on this as also some of Africa's heritage in terms of ET visitation and the ancient aliens theory that has been very well represented in a lot of television and social media platforms. In terms of the Dogon people of Mali, I think, again, a lot of you will be familiar with this history of this group in a country called Mali in West Africa. And they had astronomical knowledge or knowledge of the stars, which they claimed they received from ET visitors who came from the Sirius star system. And this knowledge was predated a lot of the astronomical or astrophysics knowledge that we have at the moment. And so they suggested there was an ET presence amongst the Dogon back in the time. A very interesting case it's been written about, and I think something to further look into. Here's a depiction of some of their own depictions of that star system. And then in South Africa, we obviously have the work of Michael Tellinger, who's been influenced by Zecharia Sitchin's work, his book, The Slave Species of the Gods, The Secret History of the Anunnaki and Their Mission to Earth. And the Adams Calendar is a ruin which was believed to be inhabited by people in the 16th century. But Tellinger makes the case that the construction dates, in fact, back to 300,000 years ago, and has an ET dimension to it in terms of ET having constructed these the circular calendars. And then moving to Cynthia's work, as I mentioned before, very important work that she did to do extensive research and document cases across the African continent, but mainly in the Southern African region. In her journal, the UFO Afri News. It was first published in 1988 and continued until 2000. I can't find a trace beyond 2009, but she passed in 2000, as I said, and this you can access very easily online using the link. If you just Google it, it'll come up and you'll be able to see it. So she did some amazing work that in fact is probably our only record of UFO research on the African continent. And then Credo Mutua, I think some of you mentioned, you've already met with him. You met with him before he passed on. He was a great African spiritual leader. We call them Sangomas in South Africa, renowned for his work on indigenous knowledge. And he described encounters with 14 feet tall, chalk white humanoid reptilian beings situated at underground bases. And he wrote a book called Africa's Hidden History, The Reptilian Agenda, and which he argues that negative ET agenda here laid the foundation for a lot of the colonization, the exploitation of the land, and the global conspiracy to subjugate the African peoples. Very interesting take on things. And then, of course, the best known case, by far the best known case, which Cynthia Hind, in fact, had a very central role in uncovering, is the Ariel School. On the 14th of September 1994, 62 children between the ages of 6 and 12 years old witnessed an ET spaceship landing. There you have one child's depiction of that landing. An ET emerged from the spaceship and actually spoke to them. I think this was telepathically. The 62 children were subsequently visited by Cynthia Hind, and she invited Dr. John Mack, the professor of psychiatry at Harvard University, to come down and gauge the truthfulness of the claims. This has been very well documented. And as I heard that one or two of you have met some of the children who are now grown up, they're all grown up and still hold to the belief of what they saw. So I think this has been amazing what Cynthia did and in terms of recording this case, because it really is one of the best case studies we have going forward. So to begin to conclude, maybe just a few thoughts. It's clear that we need to do much more research, analysis, awareness raising to reset the human mindset. We also need to establish this dialogue of belief systems. I think, most people do not like to have the belief systems challenged. And we see a lot of defensiveness, internal resistance. It plays into stigma and the ridicule. So this dialogue is important. Also, we need to move beyond the nuts and bolts versus consciousness debate. It really is a false debate. There is consciousness, and within consciousness, you have the nuts and bolts, and as human beings, we're also part of that larger cosmic, consciousness creation. Community conversations, I think, are absolutely necessary. Interstellar team building, this is what I think some of the work that the Source of Synergy Foundation is doing. So I really do commend Diane and her team for what she's doing. What are the implications in terms of deprogramming ourselves? There's lots of cultural programming, which, prevents just open conversations being had. We have a lot of work to do to shift mindsets going forward. And I think some of the points that Dr. Hurtak mentioned about the importance for us to actually begin to talk about the politics, the cosmology, the politics, the sociology, and the economics of what's happening. I think this is something that we need to start focusing on, as a community. So what are the issues that we need to begin to actually be dealing with as a global society? If and when interstellar visitation becomes much more open and widespread, as Alan says, it's exasperating that more people are not talking about this issue. And so there's a lot of work for us to do just to get this in the wider mainstream. I think we talk amongst ourselves a lot, but we need to start really engaging even journalists. I think journalists would be great to train in this, because a lot of them, as you saw from Alan's PowerPoint slide, that they tend to sensationalize this quite a bit, which means that we're not having very open and fruitful conversations going forward. So with that, let me just stop there, Diane, and obviously the conversation continues. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Tim. One thing I just want to ask you before the Hurtaks jump in about their African research is, I didn't hear you mention any current cases. Like here, there's always sightings, someone's reporting a sighting or a video, or someone's having some kind of, even in China, there were people reporting dream experiences because they're not allowed to come out publicly and say they've seen something. Is there any current cases you're aware of going on in Africa?
There are always reports, but again, there's no one doing any systematic research to go and interview and document. So this is our big challenge. Something appears in the sky, people might just witness it, they might film it on the phone, but beyond that, we don't really have any kind of field researchers who can go out and do this work. I think this is some of what we're hoping to do. I spoke to ICER, the ICER group, and they're keen to do much more work in Africa. So hopefully we'll be able to get some current cases going forward. But it's good to establish the foundation that there is some legacy in Africa, at least, which we can build upon going forward.
There's a huge legacy in Africa, especially Egypt being the source of Western civilization. So, JJ, Desiree, do you have comments about your work in Africa?
First of all, I want to thank Tim for an excellent overview. Many of you know that Desiree and I work with Cory Whitley for more than 25 years. We did a motion picture with him called Voice of Africa, which has won 2 international awards. And this film is still available on our website, keysofenoch.org.
Maybe we can get Tim a copy at some point.
It goes into several of the cases of close encounters, studies through the spiritual philosophical tradition of East Africa. And of course, the links with Egypt. Of course, Egypt is the nexus for all of Africa and the Near East. In so many ways, it's really the repository of some of the best and intellectual traditions.
Yeah, and I have to say, when we work with both people in Brazil and some of the indigenous people there, and also with a lot of the Zulus in South Africa and others as well, that they see these things quite often. Some of them, they consider it part of their tradition, their heritage. Some of them are a little concerned, like the Brazilians for sure. They don't like when lights appear in their skies near their houses and near their, tribal villages and stuff. They think it's not a good thing. I think Zulus are more just normally kind of aware of that, but they don't make a big deal out of it. I think that's the main thing. I don't think they've really processed it, that it's maybe extraterrestrials coming, and watching what they're doing. Of course, we're very good friends with Elizabeth Clark. I think you're probably familiar with her. And she was the one that was up on actually in the area.
Table Mountain,
Drakensberg. And she had direct encounters with a being that literally landed, walked out of the spaceship, talked to her, came back later, walked out of the spaceship, took her with him to his planet, which was Proxima Centauri, an Alpha Centauri area which is the neighboring star, and talked about his whole heritage. So, but that was a different thing because she was a kind of a British South African. But, you know, when you get into what's going on there, I think there's sightings all over Africa as well. And fortunately, you do have people that are looking at Adam's calendar.
Yes, I think the African heritage has to be understood as part of the overall picture. So I'm very thankful that Tim is part of this conversation.
Let's get back to the Ariel School, because Alan and I were at a MUFON meeting in Philadelphia, and we talked face to face. Now, how many years later? Over 20 years later.
94 or something, wasn't it?
Yeah. So almost 30 years later, to a girl who remembered it, and she just talked to us about it. So when the being landed, and then he came out, he mesmerized them, like the eyes, like kind of like froze. And she was concerned about her little brother who was nearby. So she actually fought it. And she actually broke away from that stare and went to find him. She was one of the few people that could do that, but everyone was just mesmerized. All the teachers were in a PTA meeting, and the kids were just outside playing when this light ship came down and then the being got out. So it was two little aspects to that thing. It was amazing. And, but has it changed their lives? What do you think? Tim, did you notice, have you talked to any of them yourself at this point?
No, actually, I haven't been able to talk to any of them. A lot of the information that I've got has been through some of the work like people like you have done, actually, and the social media and so on. So it would be really amazing to speak to one of them, or at least to see, you know, just their take on that experience, and we can build on that.
Well, there's a movie coming out by Randy Nickerson called Ariel School. It's interesting. I don't know if it's a coincidence that it's Ariel School and now the phenomenon is known as an Ariel phenomena, but there is a lot of those synchronicities that happen in the phenomena. Like, you know, for instance, another synchronicity, getting off the point, the day the Blue Book ended was December 16th, 1969. The day the New York Times released their first report was December 16th. So I don't know. I don't think that's just a coincidence, but I think there's codes and influences that are happening. But getting back to the Ariel School, that was the most important case of witnesses of young children, that there were drawings, and John Mack went there. I think JJ went there. Dr. Hurtak went there to talk to these children. So that was a huge worldwide phenomenon that happened there in Southern Africa. So we just all need to stay in touch with what's going on a planetary level, and maybe we can open up the floor to see about people's input in this room. Unless you go ahead, Desiree. Yes.
I just want to say one other thing. Well, they didn't get much information. These kids were just more mesmerized by what they were seeing and what they were witnessing. But the girl you and I talked to, she said, well, the one image she got, and this is typical of many other people like Carlos Diaz, is that there's a problem with the environment, right? Remember she said that to us, Alan?
Yeah.
That was the one message that they got to these kids. The environment is in trouble. We need to help the environment. That was exactly.
Was that telepathic, Desiree? How did they get the message?
Telepathic.
They just got it in their heads. That was what they got.
And they all said they heard the same thing.
At least the girl we talked to, yeah.
Susan's familiar with this case. Susan, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, one of the pieces that I remember the most, I would actually play the clip with this little girl saying this. I played it in my emotional intelligence workshops, and I took the volume off, and I was trying to have the people that took the workshops be able to decipher what this child was feeling and what did they pick up without hearing the sound. It was my way of planting seeds way back then, about 15 plus years ago, in regards to this phenomenon in business and high level academic Ivy League settings, believe it or not. So that was the way I did that. But one of the things that the girl said is the being told her that we must not become too technologed. And that was one of the pieces, besides the ecological damage, that I remember. And Alan just weaving that back into the government narrative, a massive concern, as we know, is that this technology constantly stepping ahead of human natural evolution, or as Rebecca Hardcastle, right, talks about exo-consciousness, right? And by the way, she has a great book in regards to human exo-consciousness and this kind of, not battle with AI, but, with what we're dealing with from a technological standpoint. So I just wanted to add that piece, because personally for me, that was one of the aspects that, I've kept an eye on. It was a great little clip too.
And do I just have one question to you, Susan, because you've been involved in this for so long. What do you think we should do about bringing the world into more awareness? What's your?
I think the conversations. I think people creating organizations like John and Jean are doing. I know Anna Luce, what she's doing, and everyone's doing something different in their own way. Like you talked about Zenka, there's a lot that's emerging here. And it doesn't seem that there's any one group that's doing something so similar to the other, which is really cool. So, I think we're on go for the creation aspect and to keep the conversation moving. I mean, this is my day-to-day life, if I'm going to get my hair done or going to the doctor, whatever, there's openings, people are looking for answers, and I'm dropping it now and not thinking twice about it, because that openness is there, and you don't get that weird little shock factor that you used to get, or the brush off, it's just not there. That about training journalists, I thought that was absolutely phenomenal. I happen to be soon to be married to one. So those are fantastic suggestions. And also I think we need to be mindful, of these dominant narratives, stepping in the way of, and the fear factor in managing that, being rational, pragmatic, and also, to neutralize that fear, because typically, behind that, we find that, there's a greater mystery, and it's usually much more cooler than we could possibly imagine. So thank you for asking.
Wow, thank you. Anyone? I know, like, I like what you said, Susan, that we're all kind of attacking the monster at different parts of it, that's not a monster, but attacking this thing or going at this thing from different places. I know Joan actually just has her book about UFOs in Montana, and that's like a little corner of the world that most people don't even know where it is. But do you want to talk about your work, Joan, a little bit? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I'm continuing to be a speaker with Humanities Montana. I have a couple of jobs coming up in the next 6 months, and I really enjoy that, getting to go into these rural communities and hearing amazing stories, and also beginning to see some of these star children coming forward. And I would love to work more with them. But I had one more. I've been very interested. In Cradle Moudwa for a long time. But one of the most amazing stories while we're talking about Africa that I want to make sure gets brought in here is the story about the white lions and the mystery of the white lions, and the work that Linda Tucker has been doing down there, and how the white lions and a lot of white animals started occurring after there was a star that landed on Earth. And I think Cradle tells this story about this beloved woman who was the queen of an empire, some kind of a queendom in South Africa 400 years ago, not that long ago, long enough there to be still oral history. And she was much loved. As I recall, her name was Nambi, which means homely, because that was what she was. But they loved her very much, and she was a great leader. And she became very ill, and everyone was praying for her. And then they talked about how the people came running and said, a star has landed. And they went out to see the star that landed, and a being comes out of it that's light being, and she approaches it and touches her hand, and then it disappears. And she says, I need to go with the star. And she is taken and brought back, in the story, it doesn't say how long later, and totally healed. And after that, the white animals started appearing, including the white lions. And Credo had a lot to say about the significance of the white lions and how we treat them on the planet. So I just wanted to make sure that that's not from Montana, but I'm interested in a broader thing. So I wanted to throw that in there.
Did you hear any of that in when you talked to him, JJ, Desiree, about from Credo?
Credo. Yeah, actually, you know, we know Linda Tucker pretty well, and of course, white lions are an interesting thing. I relate to that more also like the white buffalo that's here also, and how they appear for the Native Americans, the Lakota. So I think that there's legends about these all over the place. And yes, I mean, let's talk also, if we want to talk about white buffalo or, you know, white lions as well, these are all part of, we believe, intelligences that have come here to give us certain species on the planet. And that's not that far-fetched from, we'll say, the hybrid children or the hybrids or the star seeds that are coming as well. Alan, you've been doing a lot with the star seeds, and you're going to have a program, right? Is that going to be one of your main programs? Or
It is part of the series that's starting on May 19th, the Making Contact series, where we're talking to people like Marina Sarin. If you look at her with these big eyes, she's definitely not all human. So there's this is another example of that. There's so much to this conversation. It's not like just flying saucers or objects in the sky. That's just the first layer. We just have to get there as a planetary civilization, but I think we need to lay it all out on the table, sort of like they did when me and JJ and Desiree went to the UFO hearings in Washington, D.C. I think in 2013. There were 5 days of testimony by 40 different experts that finally the people they were talking to, which were former members of Congress, said, oh my God, this is really going on. And that's the conversation I think we as a planetary civilization, not just citizens of this country or that continent, but everyone needs to have, because this, I think it's ultimately for our benefit, because of the technology, the biology, and if we can get over the fear factor, we can really upgrade human civilization. This is about us as much as it is about something else. So,
Alan,
yes, JJ.
That event called the Citizens Hearing was videotaped, and we have congressmen and women involved here on high levels. And I think that series of videotapes should be a must for young people going into high school and college to see what the mainstream of American research is telling us right now. We have to come together in a new society. We have to lay out an educational program, not simply extraterrestrial nuts and bolts or physical technology, but we have to see the larger picture of all humanity being introduced to a new sociology, a new psychology, a new cosmology. And this is a much larger picture than the specialists in Washington, D.C. or the Pentagon have wanted to share. Now things are changing. And again, everything is going to change from the beginning of archaeology to zoology, et cetera. We're going to realize we live in a vast and awesome universe, and we are very important participants if we share the message of love, understanding, and harmony. If we simply veer off and let the military experts tie the knot around all of the information, then we're back in the same boat of the last 75 years. The military do not have all the answers. It comes really to the sociologist, the environmentalist, the psychologist, and the children who had actual experiences.
Right.
They wanted to just share a little bit.
Okay, and then I want to call on Anna Luz about her part of the world, what's going on there after Brad and Ken. Yeah, is that what you're saying?
I mean, yes, in Australia, like I was saying before, I mean, there's so many different experiences in the past as well. I mean, it's actually interesting trying to investigate more into the indigenous or the Australian Aboriginal experiences and some of their views on it. It's very difficult. I mean, it hasn't been taken very seriously, I guess, by researchers back in Australia. I mean, there are a few, but it'll be interesting to get into a deeper as
Talk
to
about the Pleiades, though.
Yeah, there's a very strong, I mean, a lot like what Tim was saying, there's a very strong legacy in Australia as well, where the Aboriginal people of Australia have a connection with the Star Nations or the Star people. So a lot of those Aboriginal cultures, those tribes in Australia, believe they came from the stars. So they weren't a product of human evolution here on Earth, but they were directly seeded onto the continent of Australia as you know, like you could call it a Genesis point, or Garden of Eden, if you like. So a lot of those cultures speak of contact with these higher beings. But like Tim was saying, in Africa, I think there's also a lack of field research within the Aboriginal cultures of Australia, where a lot of those sightings may be happening right now, but we don't know about it because they're not being documented very well. And there's not a lot of good intercultural dialogue between the different cultures in Australia, between maybe the Aboriginal people and those people not from Aboriginal cultures who are actually doing that UFO research.
Yeah. And it's considered quite taboo in some ways as well. But I mean, they talk about things like the Min lights, they call them, which are these strange lights that appear in Central Australia. So, you know, there's lots of, I mean, there are sightings from people who campers and so forth, sees these things quite regularly. But there is a lot of stuff. But, you know, even going back about the star seeds and all of this, I mean, I spend a lot of time talking with Marie Rodwell about this back years ago when we were doing a conference together. And it's interesting seeing a lot of young people coming out with these experiences. And there's some really interesting, gifted young people in Australia who have this unique contact experience. So it's really trying to get them also to speak up, you know, not feeling, again, the taboo of speaking about this amongst their own, you know, age group.
Right. And about 10 days ago, Alan and us were with a Hopi elder who was talking. And unfortunately, Clifford Mahudi was from the Zuni land, and he passed away. He was one of the few people to talk about the star people connected with these local Native American cultures. But with the Hopi person we were talking to, he said a lot of that information is really just not available. You almost have to go to Lakota, who have now brought this forward. And one of the things they brought forward is a connection between Orion and the Pleiades.
Yes, Orion and the Pleiades stand out again and again, even in the biblical context of the Old Testament book of Job, which is technically an Oriental text. But you find this also amongst the various tribes of North America and South America that we've been working with for well over 45 years. And so this is why we need a new astronomy, cosmology. We have to really open up what I will call a synergistic approach. And this is why Diane Williams has used this term. We have to realize that multiple levels of information have to converge with those who want the big picture, who want to be holistic citizens, and who want to contribute positive information rather than just the negative stories. Why? Because what we see here on Earth is also in outer space, and we have to be highly selective in working with those forms of cosmic intelligence. Positive are from the Pleiades, according to most tribes that we've talked to. The positive are from areas of Orion, particularly the belt of Orion, which is why so many pyramidal temples throughout the world line with the belt of Orion, from Africa to Asia.
I do want Ken Scott to just say a little bit about the Pleiades and one of the
Okay, and then we're gonna ask some other people what's going on. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so actually quite universally, not just across Australia, but across the world.
And New Zealand.
New Zealand and the Pacific. Those indigenous cultures have a particular reverence or connection to the Pleiades, which is known by its common term, the Seven Sisters. So there's this really strong feminine vibration that's coming from the Pleiades, and this kind of seedbed of creation where people, for example, the Pitjantjatjara tribe in Central Australia, talk about these 7 women that are being chased by Orion the Hunter. And you see that story across many different cultures across the world. You always see Pleiades connected to the feminine. Orion's always the hunter. But we know of an author called Munya Andrews, if you want to look her up. She's done a great book on the Pleiades and how indigenous cultures see the Pleiades.
And she's Aboriginal.
And she is Aboriginal herself. And so she's bringing forth that high knowledge of the Pleiades. And in the Pacific, for example, they talk about the Pleiades as Maraliki or Marariki. And for them, it's the heliacal asynchronous rising of the Pleiades. It signifies the new year for the Maori across Polynesia.
And for the Aztec as well in the new fire ceremony. It wasn't every year, but it was a special time.
Well, let me ask, thank you guys. But let me ask Annaloos, what's going on? You're in the Netherlands and what?
I'm actually in the African region right now together with Kurt. We are Mauritius, so we just next to
Oh,
Madagascar.
oh, you're there. You're near Africa. Oh, okay. But
Yeah, so this is why this is very interesting and close to our heart, and yeah, fascinating. I mean, I lived in South Africa in 1996, 1997, and had a lot of conversations there with the indigenous African students about ETs, about also magical beings, the little people. They were part of our daily college conversations when I was at Tux there. And yeah, it was very much accepted. Interesting. It didn't come so much in the with the Afrikaner and the English students, but for the people in the township, this was quite normal. And the boy that, or the young man who I used to became friends with, and he had many of such visitations. But he felt very concerned to speak about it with white people, because he did not want to be misunderstood, and he did not want to be made, you know, an example of getting into trouble. So we developed a relationship of trust, because he knew I could see what he would see, and so we had that same understanding of the invisible world. And then when I lived for 8 years in Australia, in Canberra. This is where I had my strongest experiences, you know, with different intelligences, UFOs, etc. And I mean, full-on experiences. And also when I met with one of the elders from the Northern Territory, you know, I frequently have this dream always about the white beluga whale, and how the Strieber people came here and then came into the ocean, became the beluga whale, and then the beluga whale coming on the land and then going back and then mating with humans, and how this kind of hybrid human came. And so when I was telling him about my dreams, he says, that's our dreaming. This is our origin story of that part of the Kimberley. So there were, you know, very, very strong stories of that. And also when, you know, I was learning from them and working with the dreaming maps, and of course the songlines as well. And if you're looking at the religious paintings, the dotted paintings, I mean, just hold your hands over that, right? In that is the whole cosmology. I mean, it's like those paintings and the dotted patterns, and the way that holding the dreaming story itself is a portal. So if you look well, you know where to look. All the signs are there in the same way that, in, you know, in some of them, when we're walking the song lines as well, and the stories, knowing within the rocks where to hold your hands. Which are the portals, you know, where to go, also with the water holes where the souls of the new babies were coming. I mean, the women notice all the fertility rites in the caves where they know to sing for the new souls to come in. So for them, it's just really, really natural. And this is, I put, just to put some things in perspective, Archie Roach, I think he's a fantastic Aboriginal singer. But what really struck me is that when he, in one of his songs, he was talking about how they came, and the way that he sang the song about as if the aliens and then they vaccinated us. He actually made a mockery that these were the white people. So for them, it's like the white people and the way that they entered and violated, that those were the aliens. But the people from the stars and the other planets, they're family. They're not aliens, you know. Yeah. So this is, I think, as well, where if researchers are coming in and asking people, you know, to share about their experiences, it's really important that we enter into ceremony first, an indigenous ceremony, and we accept it as family, because you also don't talk about such things unless you're in a sacred relationship. And it's, you know, so I think all of that has to be put in context, but that's been my experience of living there. Yeah.
Well, beautiful. That's great. But, you know, I think it's great we're having this conversation, but it's also just square one. What do we do about it? It's the bigger question. Okay, it's happening. It's worldwide. Lots of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people probably, and indigenous. But what's the next step is my question. Jean, you're shaking your head in agreement. What do you have to say there?
Yeah, I'll see if I can do this in 25,000 words or less.
Okay.
And you've heard me say this before. I mean, there's already so much that is attempting to happen where the media is concerned. I mean, you're one of the key players in all of this, Alan, and quite a number of people to the piece of focusing on the own internal frequency of ourselves as an individual. Because what we then do collectively, we begin to set up let me just repeat that again. As we raise our own frequency collectively, what happens is we create a field that then allows us to communicate with beings of all different frequency vibrations. But at that point, we'll be able to connect with, interact with intelligently, overtly with the advanced beings, with those that are fully awake, setting up a magnetic field where those that are moving at a lower vibrational rate, you're going to draw to you those beings that are already operating at that level. That's some of what I hear when I hear some of Alonzo's report and we see what's happening in the media. So I go back to the thing, keep working on yourself, keep clearing the hollow bone, do the best you can as an individual, because we're already beginning to connect collectively in creating that resonant field. So.
Thank you. Thank anybody, Kurt or Puria or.
I'd like to hear back from Tim if we can a little bit, if he's still with us.
Well, I actually wanted to bring up what Tim said. There's when we talk about nuts and bolts versus consciousness, it's all part of a spectrum, and I think that's sort of where we have to sometimes gravitate to one end of the spectrum, but it's an integrated thing, the nuts and bolts and the consciousness. Tim,
yeah, because I was so happy that Tim also saw that. A lot of times we deal with extraterrestrial researchers and they're just into the nuts and bolts, but you see the larger picture. I'm so amazed. It's great.
Yeah. So comment on that, Tim.
Sure, yeah. And I'm just listening very intently because it's very interesting to hear all of you share your experiences. Look, I think a consciousness raising is what we're to do. We're supposed to be doing now, Alan. I think your question is what to do next. I think disclosure, as we've heard, now we've got two different strands. We've got disclosure with a small d, which has already happened according to people like Lou Elizondo and others. But we actually also need disclosure with a big D, which is the formal announcement from a government entity, because what does that do? It allows us then to actually start engaging the decision makers who have resources to actually apply to a wider planetary awareness raising program and all the other interventions that Dr. Hurtak, JJ Hurtak has been mentioning in terms of the cosmology, the psychology, the politics, the sociology. Everything changes as soon as that formal announcement is made. When we're just talking on the sidelines and there's drips and drabs coming from the Pentagon, from the Department of National Intelligence, from other countries, France, UK, Latin America, I don't think we can make a lot of progress in terms of bringing the rest of the world to engaging with this topic. And I mean, there's also been very interesting. It's been one thing that's been on my mind is why the extraterrestrials simply just don't make a massive show of presence, And then I heard a very interesting analogy that the chick that lies within the egg, it has to be mature enough before it cracks open the shell and comes out into the real world, or the new world. Let's call it the new world, not the real world. And if you crack the shell before the chick is ready, then the chick will actually die and kill itself. So we're at that stage now. We're beginning to scrape the edges of the shell from inside. We are the ones that are the beak, trying to poke open that shell and break it wide open. But we need more people to do that work so that we can actually crack the shell wide open. Once we are we demonstrate that we're ready as humanity, then the ET will make their presence felt in a much more, the spaceship on the White House lawn, president making the announcement. But that announcement, I think, is extremely important. We're getting there. We've had some formal government releases, DNI, administrative NASA, DOD, other countries, the UK MOD, French, the Comité report, so on and so forth. And we need to keep pushing that. That is our work right now. And I think that's why the journalists become very important, because the mainstream journalists become important, because then they shouldn't just be doing the sensationalist, approach with X-Files music in the background. That's actually counterproductive to what we're trying to achieve. So if you're looking at very concrete entry points, I think that's what we need to be doing right now, raising that awareness so we can actually break the shell wide open. I think the ET obviously ready to engage. It's us as humanity that are actually not ready to engage. Right now, there's a major war going on in Ukraine that's raising the level of fear around the world. The people are struggling with day-to-day issues, but surely if we just crack that shell open from the inside, not from the outside, everything changes, I think. Back to you, Ellen.
Brilliant. No, that's brilliant, because if you help the chick out of the egg before it's ready, it's not strong enough to survive. So if the ETs land, we'll be traumatized or whatever, but we need to do this for ourselves, and it is affecting humanity. That's why every country, every continent, everybody is included in this, and that's part of my vision of connecting the dots around the world, Australia, Africa, South America, everywhere, to know this is a human thing. It's a human race. It's not individually petitioned, and it's happening everywhere. When I talk to Xiao Ma in China, who's a Chinese ufologist, first of all, it's not good to talk about it publicly, but she says she's being contacted privately about people all over the China having dreams of contact. And she had to actually leave China and go to Australia in order to continue her work because it wasn't safe for her. But anybody else want to contribute anything?
We would like to open it up to anyone, because we're going to be closing in about 15 minutes. So anyone who wants to make a comment
about what their perspective, if this is new to you, or if you're already in this. I mean, Kurt, do you want to share something about your experience or your observations of this conversation as well?
Not much, really, except that that type of exchange has been going on for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I don't think that any government is going to come up and say, we're in contact. It's like when you invent a new washing machine, you keep it in store until the competition is about to bring a better one. So I don't think that any of them will just come out and say, we're in contact with the guys, we've seen them, we're working with them. If we have the edge technologies, because they help us, and so on. For the simple reason that they don't want the other party, the enemy, to know what they're doing. It's obviously, if there's anything like that happening, is that you do have different types of contacts. You have even different groups that might be in competition with each other. Some strong talk has been going that much of the Russian edge technology comes from them. And that some proposal have been made to the other government to do the same, but that they were not interested. So we are in a situation, as I said to you, which sounds very much like, I've got this big, new, beautiful piano. I'm not putting it out. I keep my patent until I see competition about to do better.
Right.
One of the ways of knowing that there is contact is to see what type of technology is being used in this war right now, and how it's being used, and the knowledge that there is behind it. How the ordinary humans have been able to acquire this knowledge. That is a question for me.
Right. Well, I think also it has to be a citizens movement, a people's movement. We can't wait for government. What were you going to say, Desiree?
That goes back to, I think, was it Susan who said about be careful of technology? I personally feel that they have given us technology. I feel they're also, we know we live in Silicon Valley, some of our lives, and people are getting downloads of this information, but it really is how we use the technology. And I think they're giving us certain things to see how we apply them, whether it's positively or negatively. I mean, because we really can't have the technology without the consciousness to go with it.
Right. And I like what Tim has said about the example of the egg. When Russell Targ and I worked together, we used the beautiful art of Ingo Swann, who was the top government psychic who saw things on Jupiter before massive spaceships got there. And he drew this picture of a human face like an egg with a whirling galaxy. And so as we began to open the egg of the human mind, let us recognize the inner dimensions that are within our mind have already connected us through consciousness, what is there in the larger universe. We are growing up as cosmic citizens. We're making a leap from humankind to space kind. It's coming very soon. I believe this is why synergy is the key. We must work together as a team and do what we're doing now in this conversation worldwide to bring people together into a new educational Head Start program.
Right. Thank you, JJ. Maria, do you want to talk about the guy you mentioned in the chat, Martin van Staveren, and what his experiences were?
Yeah, I just can share that I watched several videos of him. His name is Martin van Staveren. He lives in the Netherlands, and I don't think so that there is a lot available in English yet, but as he was in contact since his early childhood and still is and visited many different planets, he really has a lot of experience. And what I just remember and where I also resonate a lot with is that we tend to put a lot of emphasis on technology, but our heart is such a great tool. And I just noticed that often, maybe on purpose, the focus is taken away too much to outer technology, and we really have the biggest technology just in us. And when we conquer that back and really embody that, there is so much more possible.
Well, thank you. That's why we're calling this Consciousness and Contact a synergy circle, because it is about our evolution and who we are, for sure. Tim, did you have something to say? Or John, do you want to say something here? John Pearson?
I want to jump in very quickly if I could, Alan.
Okay, yeah, Tim and then John. Okay, sorry. Yes, please.
Yeah, Alan, I know you're such a great leader on this issue, and I've just been added like a bit of a brainstorm that maybe what we need is a march on Washington.
Yes.
On the UFO issue.
Yes.
There are quite a number of congressmen that are now, and women that are now very, very publicly speaking out openly about this. And that march would actually generate a lot of media traction, I think. That could actually then trigger like much more, kind of activities. I mean, it doesn't have to be a big one. We're not aiming for 1 million. I mean, if we get 150 people and we just make it look like there's a lot of us, that could be one way to get things like really moving much faster in Washington. Just a thought, Alan. You lead us, Alan.
Yeah, I did talk about that, a citizens movement, like the way the anti-war and Women's March and Black Lives Matter, all that made a difference, I think. And it's just about, we were talking to someone named our friend in Ojai about that last year, but it takes a lot of organization, and maybe that's something that some of us here can maybe work on. But thank you. I that's definitely something people have thought about. But let's talk about that too. John, did you want to say something there?
Well, I just wanted to say that there are two important tracks. One is the public conversation and the discourse. And JJ, I think the educational part of that is important as well. So we need to get the conversation going. We need to influence the conversation to have the governments reveal more of what they know. But the other point is you can't think your way to ongoing contact. All of that comes, as Puria said, it comes through the heart. It comes through opening the heart and opening the intuition because we have to remember that these extraterrestrial beings are also transdimensional beings. They live in a higher dimension, and they have to lower their vibration to get to our vibration to be able to communicate, and we have to raise ours. So the inner work is important, and also the work through the heart, and as Jean says, clearing out all the stuff that no longer serves us. That, I believe, is the path to achieving ongoing communication.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think that's why we're meeting here, to remind each other of this. Maybe we can end this session with a little meditation with Desiree and JJ. But before we do that, does anyone have anything? Joan, yeah, please. Unmute, Joan. Unmute.
Just had some things I just wanted to add, especially regarding Africa, and I put it in the chat about Lawrence Vanderpost and his book, The Mantis Carol. And he mentions in that book that the Kung Bush people have the same word for the praying mantis as they do for God. And because there are so many mantis beings reported, I'm just quite sure there's a connection there. And the other thing that I wanted to also touch on was Sekhmet, and how important she is in Egypt mythology. And then there is a lot of talk about the lion people. And one of the places that they are believed to come from is Sirius, which is why the white lions, McCradle said that the way we treat those white lions will determine the future of the planet. So anyway, there's puzzle pieces. I just wanted to offer them up as long as we're on the Africa subject.
No, I think that's really, it's good to keep adding to this information tree that we're creating, so it's like, so where do we go from here also is a question I want to throw out to the group and anyone who wants to speak. Okay, we can keep talking about this, but should we start to share more personal stories in this public forum? I know we're doing it other places, but I'd like to, I think some of us have had contact. Some of us are inspired because, at least I am, I'll talk about, because I've had contact, and I just don't know why everyone's not talking about this. So where do we also want to go from here? Any suggestions?
I think, I can say a couple words. Can you hear me? Because my internet dropped and now I'm on my phone.
I know.
But Tim mentioned earlier interstellar team building. So I think maybe on the next call, we can explore what that might look like. Would that happen in ceremony? Would that happen through vision quests in the desert? But how do we bring that into form? I think that's really important. I'm really glad that publications like The Sun and the National Enquirer, remember those publications that we would see, that they're being vindicated on some levels, because everybody thought that what they were reporting on just wasn't true, and they were being ridiculed and not taken seriously. So I'm also happy to, to witness this at this point in time. I love the idea of the March on Washington. I think that's something that we can maybe even create a sub-team to bring that to life. But anyway, this has been a really fabulous conversation. So thanks to all of you.
But for the next conversation, instead of, where would we go from here in our next conversation, Diane? What do you see?
Well, I think like you started with, a lot of times there's the negative side of contact. So what can we personally do to really present the positive side, especially for young people? Like Susan was saying, young people have so much curiosity. We see a lot of young celebrities now talking about their experiences. So really, what can we do to really reinforce that?
Yeah, and maybe I'll have a guest speaker. Me and Desiree will think about who we can bring in here to kind of add to the conversation as well. And
if anybody has any other ideas on that, please let us know. Like, who do you think would be a great guest? What do what are you thinking we should be doing next? Like Alan's asking, we'd love to hear and get some direction also from all of you.
But I think it's just good to keep this conversation going, in which I'll be doing with my Making Contact series in a deeper way. We're going to go deep into all these aspects of consciousness, and the Hurtaks are going to add their really deep research, as especially some of the specimens that JJ came across in his studies really add to the scope that this is a reality. We need to wake up, and we need to know this is a positive effect, I think, for humanity, because it holds the secrets to technology, biology, sociology. And of course, no one's going to save us from ourselves. That's the other aspect here, right?
I had a thought too with
Yeah.
the March on Washington. Maybe it should be like a sit-in meditation on Washington, where people are meditating and making contact. I think
Right.
that would get quite a lot of media attention.
You can sit in front of the Lincoln Memorial. You can get a permit to sit there. I did a UFO disclosure fest there, but it didn't get that much attention. So, John or Jean, do you have something to add there?
Yeah, I just want to know where we could go forward maybe with this group, because we will be meeting on a regular basis, is even though we do have other venues where people are able to share their own experiences, maybe some element within the public forum here, there would be a place where people can share their own experience. In contact. Yeah.
Right. So if I can continue on, yeah, I thought that this is a great gathering. It's something we hadn't done before, where we were able to get not only Tim with Africa and Australia and Anna Luz from both parts of the world. Anyway, I think it's a great addition that we've done to this conference.
And this is the gathering, what we call symbolically the gathering of the tribes, when each of the division of the human race comes together with a sense of excitement, a sense of awe that we're going to do this together as a humanity who feels really the surge forward with the light in the divine experience. That rediscovery of the divine spark within each of us really signals a new phase, a new chapter in the book of life.
So maybe, Alan, we can maybe just do a little closing here.
Yeah, wait, let me just ask Marcel if he has any comments, because I just noticed you there, Marcel. Unmute. Yes, unmute.
Yes, I'm sorry I'm late. I had a
That's
meeting
okay.
till now. Always great to see you all. Maybe you have discussed, my question would have been simple. If in the current world we are, I believe if nuclear at any point would be a problem, we get help from extraterrestrial.
You know,
Did you discuss this, or that's something I would be very curious about? I was doing some research.
If I can jump in here, though, that Alan, when we'll say the Ukraine incident started happening, people kept asking Alan, where are the aliens on this? And we all said, well, maybe with nuclear, that would be like the bottom line, that, you know, the nuclear would be the cutoff point. And they have shown us that they've neutralized nuclear weapons, that they've done other situations, that being able to divert missiles into a different place. So we were talking more, Marcel, about Africa and the ancient legends from Egypt to South Africa. And then my friends sitting here from Australia, mostly their legends. But that would be something maybe to talk about next in the next conversation.
Well,
great. I gonna listen to the recording.
Look at the work of Robert Hastings, who talks about, and Robert Sala, who talks about his book where he was working at a nuclear site as a military, and they shut off the nuclear missile codes, and so they are showing us they are concerned with nuclear technology. I don't know if they're going to stop that from happening, because it's what we're doing to each other that's the big problem here. So we definitely have to change our vibration, as everyone's been saying, Tim and John and Jean and Desiree, JJ. So why don't we end with a vibrational uplift with the Hurtaks? And
right. Well, we're here in Hopi land in northern Arizona, but all of us throughout the world share this amazing future together. So let's just take a moment to see our minds soar into space in the form of a dove. The white dove, which is the universal symbol of peace, communication, and higher teaching. And let this dove above our head, representing our higher consciousness, encircle Mother Earth, shedding light down upon the children in every part of the world, that we shall come together in unity and recognize this is the time of great graduation. Let this white dove also encircle the nuclear facilities of the world and places of conflict, bringing down the lights of resolution, of balance, of harmony, And let this white dove also soar into the sky and meet those we will call the extracelestials, those beings of light who have graduated beyond physical evolution, who exist as light bodies, that they may join in with the family of nations and bring us into what we will call a spiritual United Nations.
Yes, and let us bring forth our light and our energy also to neutralize any actions of violence, to make them into peace, make them into holistic understandings and comprehension of how we are all one Adamic species on this planet. And let us merge into that unity so that we are more and more accepted by the higher beings of light who are also here to help us.
Thus the white dove encircles Cape Town and Table Mountain. The white dove encircles the Flinders Range in Australia. The white dove encircles the great Andes of South America. The white dove encircles all humanity with the lesson that we must be peacemakers and we must be the avant-garde of a great and wonderful change that is coming, where we will take this leap from humankind to spacekind, and we will join the family of galactic nations as being peacemakers in our time. Let the divine be with us. So let it be. So let it be, as we say the four great amens for the four directions of humanity. Amen, 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 and amen.
Thank you, Alan and Diane. Go ahead and
Thank you, Tim, for your input here. Very important. And we will stay connected and keep this circle going, this planetary circle. Any closing words, Diane, as the leader?
Just thank everyone, JJ, Desiree, Alan, their guests, everybody on the call. Always so happy to come together. And I think let's plan this worldwide, not just on Washington, but worldwide meditation for contact together. I'm happy to help take a lead on that. And if you're interested, be in contact with us. So thank you so much, everyone.
Right. And we'll meet again in a month. Are we meeting again?
We'll have to see. Possibly. We'll have to see what we have planned.
It's always good to have these conversations. And I just want to remind people, I am doing this little quick commercial at the end. I am doing this online conference. So join us, really, because we want to go deeper into this conversation. Go to makingcontactseries.com, because it's a chance for a lot of us to share with some major experts, including the Hurtaks and some other very important people in the field. Linda Moulton Howe, Whitley Strieber, Marie Rodwell will be there. So let's just stay connected, and Tim will be in touch. And thanks so much, and everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Excellent presentation.
And keep the faith going, because we are making a change. We are making a difference, and this is branching out like a ripple effect around the planet, because it's our time. It's our time to connect the dots and realize we are one humanity meeting another oneness. That's the movement of evolution. When the ones come together, they form a multicellular organism, and that forms bigger organisms, and we're about to meet the bigger organism that we're a part of. We're not separate from the cosmos. So thanks again.
And did Tim have any closing words?
Oh,
Tim,
yeah.
would you like to say anything?
No. And I think Alan said it all. He said
I don't think I said it all, but I think there's a lot.